Story 1. Pass lock was a feature in some cars from the early 2000s designed to prevent car theft. Periodically, the car would not start for 10 minutes, and you had to turn the key to the auxiliary position to reset it. I had a car with that feature, and it irritated me greatly because it was so sporadic when it would activate. It might happen once a week or every day for a week. It was always a surprise whether the car would start on the first try or not. Apparently, the only fix involved taking apart the ignition, but many dealerships refuse to do it for warranty reasons. Story 2. My car has a crash warning feature that is a big flashing red light and loud alarm if it detects a possible collision. I did not know about this feature, and the first time it activated, it startled me and I almost crashed. Story 3. Not sure it counts as a safety feature, but my car has a touchscreen radio. Occasionally, a message will pop up that says something about paying attention to the road and not the radio. It will not go away until I acknowledge it by pressing OK on the screen. It is distracting and causes me to look away from the road. Why? Story 4. Not in cars anymore, but many cars in the 1980s had seat belts with motorized shoulder portions. Story 5. As a passenger, I am not able to adjust the settings, buttons, or screens while the car is moving. I am not driving. I can safely add a Bluetooth device. Story 6. The collision alert in new General Motors vehicles vibrates the seat. Thank you, General Motors. I did not appreciate that unexpected experience and would prefer it not happen again. Story 7. Passenger seatbelt alarm. A lot of times I put a bag or some groceries in my front seat, and it thinks there is a person there not wearing a seatbelt. The thing is, it is never more than 25 pounds. What kind of 25-pound human would be sitting in my front seat? Story 8. The loud warning sound indicating it is cold outside. I already know this. That is why I am wearing a coat. The noise and warning light cause unnecessary anxiety when they happen suddenly, usually 10 minutes down the road in the middle of a maneuver. Story 9. Crash avoidance automatic braking. A car in the turning lane makes my truck slam on the brakes violently. It was the same in my previous truck and is very similar in my wife's car. Although her car does not react to vehicles in turning lanes every time. I do not know if it is a ride height issue or what. I understand that in big cities it may be useful, especially if you are often distracted, but I have to keep it turned off. Story 10. My wife's Toyota has an alarm that goes off whenever it thinks you are not looking at the road. Okay, fine, maybe conceptually that makes sense, but if you glance at the radio for half a second, the 200 decibel beep jolts you into the next lane. Story 11. My car has a 360-degree camera with collision detection. When I go through toll booths or drive-thrus, the screen shows a 360-degree view of the car, and an area is highlighted in red to indicate that I am about to crash into something, accompanied by loud beeping. I have to drive close to the drive-thru window to get the food, and the entire time, the car alerts me that there is a 1-foot gap between me and the wall. The entire left side of the car is flashing red on the screen. Story 12. Lane keeper systems physically resist changing lanes unless you have indicated. If I am changing lanes, it is likely due to another driver doing something unsafe, and I do not want a car to interfere with my avoidance actions. Story 13. Lane occupancy, also known as blind spot lights, only work some of the time. It needs to be infallible or else it is ineffective. The small blind spot mirror inside the main mirror is better. Story 14. Not really a safety feature, but giant heads-up displays with no knobs for cabin controls or sound system, and no physical buttons to toggle other features. You have to look at the display and precisely land your finger to make a basic adjustment, as there is zero tactile feedback. If you miss by a centimeter, you turn something else on or off. Story 15. Phone applications with driving mode are almost always worse than regular mode. There are more button presses and the need to tap tiny indicators. Story 16. Autopilot people using autopilot will occupy the left lane so persistently that they might as well have brought a tent and firewood. Story 17. I have an older car, so I'm not used to the newer safety features. I had to get a rental when someone hit my car, and oh my God, everything beeps all the time. Car in your blind spot, beeps. Getting too close to a curb when parking, beeps. Car in front of you starts slowing down. Beeps. My personal favorite. One of the tires had low air pressure, so I went to fill it. When it got to full, the car beeped so loud, and since I was down by the tire, it was right in my ear. 0 out of 10. Story 18. Lane assist. There are many unique driving situations that a computer could never understand. I dislike when it thinks it knows better than me and tries to correct my steering. I always turn it off. Story 19. My wife's new car has collision detection all around. It's a good concept, except it starts going crazy beeping when I'm trying to park or drive around something, even though I can clearly see that I have sufficient room. Of course, my wife trusts the technology over my eyes and gets upset with me for acting like I'm going to wreck her car. Story 20. The amount of beeping. I don't hate any of the features individually. Rear cross-traffic beeps, collision warning beeps, one departure beeps, seatbelt beeps. But when you add them together, it's just so much beeping. Also, SUVs with off-road modes should disable all of the beeping when you select them. I have had reverse automatic braking activate many times over bushes and tall blades of grass on trails, and it's seriously annoying. My favorite is when lane assist mistakes tire tracks on a gravel trail for lane markers and starts beeping at me about lane departures. Story 21. Touch screens in cars are often promoted as convenient rather than safe, but they have no place in vehicles. They are a very poor idea and remain common despite their drawbacks. They make bad drivers even worse. Story 22. That wonderful feature that helps keep you in the lane when you are trying to change lanes. Economy mode that shuts off the engine when stopped. Story 23. The default setting in new cars is to turn the engine off when you pause for a moment. It feels like the car is stalling when I am in the middle of an intersection waiting to turn. I understand that the engine restarts quickly in about 1 second, but crashes can happen in microseconds. Story 24. Banging noise for anything, especially the seatbelt or door open. Yes, I know the door is open, I opened it. Seatbelt too when I'm driving at 2 miles per hour, looking at the scenery in a park. Cameras to reverse, etc. Yes, I learned to drive in the mid-1980s when we needed to actually know what was going on in the car and how to drive it without technological assistance. Edit. Just been reading the comments and was horrified to learn about automatic braking and engine stop. I despise cruise control because it takes away feedback from your car and adds a small amount of reaction time. I guess brake assist or whatever name it has would fix that. Story 25. I drove a rented Hyundai i10 that had a speed limit detection and alert system. It tried to read the speed limit from the signs with a camera, but it often got it wrong. If you exceeded the speed limit by even 1 kilometer per hour, it would beep at you every time. Going from 40 to 41, beep, back to 40, then 41 again, beep. You could turn it off, but only for the rest of the current drive. There was no option to turn it off permanently. Also, it had auto lane centering that was unpleasant and moved the steering wheel violently. You couldn't turn that off either. Story 26. The rapid flashing brake lights make me want to run into the car with them, so I do not have to watch them blink anymore. Story 27. The whiplash arrestor cushions are being shoved too far forward. I understand the intention, but the implementation is poor. Story 28. Smart wipers. Stop that. I want them to operate at 1 speed. The rain is not falling that hard, so there is no need to use full speed. Alternatively, if it is raining harder, I do need more speed. No matter how many times I adjust the speed, the wipers go at whatever speed they choose. Story 29. Cars and trucks being larger, higher off the ground, and with larger hoods are, at most, safer for the people inside the vehicle but dangerous for everyone else. In particular, the blind spots on these vehicles are extremely large. Story 30. When you press the unlock door button on the key fob, it only opens the driver's side. You have to press the unlock button several times to unlock all the doors. Story 31. Auto start-stop. Nothing like your engine awkwardly dying at a red light just to save the planet by 0.00001 grams of carbon dioxide. Story 32. The lane keep assist is awful. I understand why it exists, but it makes me panic because the car does something I did not ask it to. I have to turn it off every time I get in. Story 33. The Lane Keeping Assist System. I accidentally turned it on once, as the button is on the right side of the steering wheel. I had no idea why my car was jerking to the left and right repeatedly. On a side note, whoever profited from making sure every car in the last 10 years has the stop/start feature is a bona fide moron. I tested whether it saves fuel or not. It does not. It will eventually burn out your starter. Story 34. No one has mentioned the brighter than the sun light-emitting diode headlights. You need to see an eye doctor if you cannot see the road with halogen lights. Put down your phone and pay attention. Story 35. When I put something in the passenger seat, the alarm for not wearing a seatbelt does not stop making noise. Story 36. My car has an automatic brake feature that activates if you back up too close to something. It is too sensitive and goes off even when parking in a tight space where you can easily see how close you are using the camera. Turning it off leaves a prominent orange warning light on the dashboard until it is reactivated. The warning light has been on for 2 years now. Story 37. Not so much a safety feature, but a reminder. Those yellow stickers on the visor are ugly and an eyesore. Story 38. My car turns off when you put it in park and unbuckle the driver's seatbelt. It is fine most of the time, but annoying when you want to just jump out and leave it running. Story 39. Every time I go 1 mile per hour over the speed limit, the car beeps at me. You can switch it off. However, the car resets itself every time you switch the ignition off. Very frustrating. Story 40. I'm not sure that it is a safety feature, but my girlfriend hates it when my BMW hugs and tightens the seatbelt whenever you get in. Story 41. Massive pillars can support the car if it flips upside down. Visibility is poor nowadays, and the backup camera is not effective. Story 42. The seatbelt beep sounds when there is something heavy in the passenger seat that is not a living thing. The car then goes ding, 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 getting louder and faster unless I buckle the passenger seat. We always buckle up, so the reminder bell has never been useful to us. I understand that it is a useful feature for those who need to be reminded to buckle up, but I personally dislike it in my own car. Story 43. Lane Assist. I was driving a rental vehicle because my own vehicle was being repaired. As I went around a gentle bend, a driver was approaching behind me in the outside lane, so I decided to be safe and move out of his way. The lane assist system resisted and caused me to swerve slightly, which felt very unsafe. Additionally, brake assist mistakenly detected foliage or a steep incline when I needed to reverse close to or up it, interpreting it as a solid wall and slamming the brakes. Story 44. My car displays a large screen about 10 seconds after I start driving to remind me to keep my eyes on the road. However, I always have to look away from the road to turn it off. Story 45. Auto braking occurs anytime. It happens on highways where the curve is enough that you are somewhat facing the car on the right. It also happens when the car is already turning and you are going slow enough to know that they will be turned by the time you get to that point. There is a lot of other babysitting. Slowing down while on cruise control due to other cars getting in front of you pushes you further back and slower. Many cars miss that my car is slowing down. I don't realize it sometimes either. So they end up realizing too late that I'm going slower, tap their brakes, and change lanes into other cars. Lane assist blares an alarm when the shoulder is darker or lighter concrete than the road surface, or there is no shoulder, or the shoulder is wider than the road. I am tired of panic safety features in everything. Story 46. My Honda CR-V will not allow me to lock the doors while I am outside the vehicle when it is running. I have a dog, so if I need to run into a store for a minute or whatever, I have to either leave it running with the doors unlocked or turn it off and then restart it with the remote start. However, even with that, it turns itself off after a few minutes. All I have been able to find online is that this is a security feature, but I cannot imagine what it is protecting me from. Story 47. Lane Keep Assist. My car has it, but I keep it turned off. A while back, I was driving my boss's car. There was a semi-truck broken down on the side of the road with the back of the trailer half blocking my lane. I had a clear view and a clear road, so I moved over to go around it. The lane keep assist nearly pulled me into the corner of the trailer. I missed it by a few centimeters. Story 48. My new Toyota has lane assist, which guides your car towards the middle of the lane if you approach the lane lines. It bothered me for a bit because the road I take home every night has two unusual lane shifts, and the lane assist would try to react to them. I turned it off one day after turning onto that road and passing 15 to 20 cyclists riding nicely in the bike lane, sometimes spilling a little into the car lane, but nothing unexpected or rude from such a large group. I shifted to the left to give them more room since there was no oncoming traffic. Lane assist tried to pull the car to the right, as if trying to hit the cyclists. I will not use lane assist in town. I may try it on the highway. Story 49. Auto-tightening of seat belts occurs when the crash detector is too sensitive. This has happened a few times and makes me more likely to panic and cause an accident. Story 50. I have no idea if it is a safety thing or a convenience thing, but please let me choose how much my driver's side window goes down. Why did they design it so that when I push the button, the window just assumes it has to go all the way down? Every time I look at my car door, I think to myself, I have a bright idea. When I push down, the window goes down. When I push up, the window goes up. When I let go, the window stops. That is how the other three windows work. But no, apparently to save our fingers the effort, the driver's side just goes all the way up or all the way down unless I quickly push and let go repeatedly until I get it to the right height. Story 51. Backup cameras that require mandatory screens in cars. Any technology that tracks how I hold the steering wheel or uses cameras pointed at my face. Story 52. Not in cars, but in an oven. It now has a child protection feature that you cannot remove anymore, except with an angle grinder. This is a strip of metal that you have to press down hard to open the oven. Well, I have news for you. 1. Not everyone can press down hard, and that does not mean they are children. More importantly, how do you think a child will get the door open if they catch their fingers in the closing door of a hot oven? I really dislike this feature and will make sure the oven does not have it when I buy another. Story 53. Well, I just found one good thing about living in a low-income country. Cars made for my market do not have most of these features. Most of them would not work anyway with our poor roads and highways. Story 54. Most of them. The lane assist took me by surprise the first time. I was going around my flooded lane, and the system fought back. Seat belt warning sound. Brake assist. I was using the brakes before the alarm went off. Adaptive cruise control, I think it's called, slows you down when it decides you're too close. I thought the cruise control was broken. I am not putting my life in the hands of a computer. Story 55. The curtain airbag systems are very beneficial in the event of an accident, but they increase the bulk of frame space around and between windows, creating larger blind spots. Story 56. The collision warning comes so late that I would not be able to do anything anyway. It yells at me about parked cars on the side of the road and is so distracting that one of these days I will hit something because I am wondering what that noise is about. Lane warnings are also useless when half the roads here are so narrow that it starts alerting at every curve. At least I can turn off that feature. Story 57. Driver monitoring is ineffective. It does not recognize when I am sleepy but overreacts when I am scanning traffic around me. Story 58. My wife's BMW has an ignition shut-off feature when stopped, but it is an option you can enable or disable. No big deal. What irritates me is that you must depress the brake pedal before you can start the engine. It is an automatic transmission. When you press the start-stop button to turn the engine off, it automatically puts the car in park if you forget. It is an automatic transmission and it is in park. Why can't I open the passenger door, drop my groceries or whatever, and lean in to start the engine to get the air conditioning or heat going while I load the rest of the groceries? No, you must be sitting in the driver's seat with the brake pedal pressed before you can start the engine. For my Chevrolet truck, there is a sensor that turns the headlights on whenever it gets dark. It also turns off all the daytime dashboard lights. For heaven's sake, all we did was drive under a cloud. The headlights are not the problem, but every time I drive under a cloud, I cannot see the dashboard until I manually turn the headlights off to get my dashboard lights back. They say it is not adjustable. Neither are the lane departure sensors, which do not activate until I am already a couple of feet into the next lane. Why tell me now? Story 59. This feature informs me if I am drifting out of the lane. In some areas, lane markings are unclear and can cause the system to be mistaken. Story 60. X amount of kilometers until empty. I prefer to go off what my fuel gauge says, and that number fluctuates based on many factors. I do not want or need it, but you cannot turn it off in my vehicle. Story 61. Can I comment on a feature I actually love? The indicator that the person in front of me is pulling away. Really effective in drive-thrus when orders take forever and my attention wanders. Story 62. Parking in the garage is a bit tight. The car will sense when it is too close to something and stop automatically. This makes parking the car difficult. Story 63. Not a safety feature, but automatic engine cutout when idling. Thanks for damaging my starter motor in the name of saving the planet. Story 64. Lane departure warnings that actually shake the steering wheel. If you are on a narrow, windy coastal road and it starts shaking the steering wheel while you are trying to navigate a switchback, it becomes incredibly difficult to stay on the road. Many systems can only be turned off temporarily as well. Story 65. Those objects in the mirror are closer than they appear. I would like to know how far away things are. Story 66. My wife's car just beeps at me non-stop and it is extremely annoying. I think one beeps when I exceed 45 miles per hour. Another chirps when it detects a vehicle in my blind spot. There might be one that sounds when I take corners too fast, but I am not sure. Another goes off when it detects police radar, I believe. I cannot tell any of them apart. Since I do not actually know what any of the beeps mean, I feel like Luke Skywalker with R2-D2 constantly babbling in computer code in the background. That is right, R2, we are going to the Dagobah system. Story 67. I cannot remove the second row seats in my 2021 Toyota Sienna because the seatbelts are integrated into a warning system. I was able to do this on my Honda Odyssey. Story 68. Lane assistance is helpful because I don't want to struggle with the car when changing lanes on a highway or, God forbid, when there is road work that directs you onto the shoulder. Story 69. Lane assist. In theory, I understand it. If you are distracted or tired, it will pull you back into the correct position. However, I had to turn mine off after it pulled me back into the lane while passing a cyclist, nearly hitting him. Frankly, if you cannot be trusted to stay in your lane, you should not be driving at all. Story 70. It makes me much madder than it should that my car screen has to show 10 seconds of a warning every time it starts up. You had better drive well and be careful. You are responsible for your own actions. Drive safely. What is the point of that? Why do I need a smarmy warning at the start? I know the explanation is lawyers or something like that, but that is not convincing. We had cars for ages without startup warnings, and there were no lawsuits saying I crashed into a tree because no one told me to drive safely. Story 71. The cruise control deceleration when the car in front of you is less than 50 miles ahead really sucks. Story 72. Literally all of them. Lane departure warning. Avoid a pothole forward collision warning. Anytime someone cuts you off or even thinks about crossing the line between you, it loudly alerts. Not a safety feature, but I dislike the automatic stop/start when coming to a stop. I hate that feature. You could idle for an hour and burn $1 worth of fuel in new vehicles. I do not care. Story 73. On my old Ford Fusion, the outside temperature display turned red and beeped if it dropped below 0 degrees Celsius, likely to warn of ice risk. Every time this happened, I thought it was broken until I realized it was simply alerting me that it was cold outside. Like, car, I know it is cold. I just spent 5 minutes scraping the ice off the windshield. Story 74. Lane assist, especially on narrow roads or when passing through construction zones, tried to pull me into a wall several times. Story 75. Blinking taillights. I despise pulse blinking taillights. Taillights should only flash like that if it is an emergency, not in rush hour traffic at 10 miles per hour. Story 76. It is not so much a safety feature, But the feature I hated the most on my last car was the automatic engine shutoff when you came to a stop at lights, a stop sign, in traffic, or anywhere else. Whenever it activated, I would wiggle my foot on the brakes to trick it into restarting the engine. It did have a button to disable it, but it reset after each drive. This feature, especially if you have 10 cars in a row with it, adds to congestion in my mind. The light goes green, the first car driver reacts, the car starts, and the driver pulls forward. Then the second car reacts, the car starts, and so on. That additional second or two for each car to start before moving will reduce traffic flow before the light goes red again. Of course, if everyone was paying attention and anticipated the need to move, it would be better. But the general public, I do not trust them. Story 77. New scissor lifts have a sensor that requires you to be in front of it. The lift cuts off every time you look down to where you are going. Additionally, the height sensor stops the lift from moving up or down. If you are in trouble, someone needs to pull the manual release from the bottom. This could potentially make a small problem bigger. Story 78. When I open the door and try to perfect my parking position, I am a mechanic and my bay is 90 degrees to the shop door. Often, I open the door to look at the hoist arms and the ground to determine if I am well positioned or need to move a few inches back or forward. No, the car goes into park. Story 79. Pretty much anything that takes control away from the driver. I have had my car slam on its own brakes for a car accelerating in front of me that we were not in danger of colliding with. That happened in a corner, which then caused the rear end to get loose, and the electronics panicked and nearly forced a complete stop and reset in the middle of the road in traffic. I have started turning all those systems off in my car since then, and the blinding yellow warning lights on the dashboard are just annoying now. I hate that. It is only there because many people refuse to focus while they drive. Story 80. Lane keep assist. I was driving a Subaru in the left lane on the highway. A semi-truck started drifting into my lane, so I slightly moved left over the line. All of a sudden, lane keep assist jerked the car to the right, and I nearly hit the truck. Story 81. Lane departure assistance caused a work vehicle to try to push me into a retaining wall by following an old lane line in roadworks. Story 82. Lane departure warning, automatic braking, alerts for an open door or unfastened seatbelt, blind spot warning. Anything that distracts the driver or serves as a crutch for poor driving. Story 83. Most of this thread discusses safety features that actually backfire or cause problems. Mine is a safety feature that many will think is good and should stay, but true to the AskReddit spirit, I find it annoying. My new car has an undefeatable traction control system. Fine, I'm okay with it being on by default, but when I want it off, I want it off. We can talk about the snow exception, but I can take my car to safe and legal performance driving events too. When my open differential on my suspension starts spinning one tire, the whole car acts like it just lost 100 horsepower for the next 3 seconds. It's frustrating. I understand people don't buy electric vehicles to race, but for my part, I just want to have some fun with what I can afford and what's better for my wallet and the environment. Also, I agree with whoever said headrests that tilt forward are uncomfortable. I'll add steering wheels that are too far away. I already sit too upright, can barely reach the wheel, the pedals feel awkward, and my head is bowed forward. Why? So I don't get whiplash or hit in the face with an airbag. Great. But I haven't had an accident in over a decade, and now I have chronic neck and back pain. Story 84. Automatic braking. 2024 Chrysler van with salt on the rear bumper. Could not back out of a parking spot without the van slamming on its brakes. Story 85. My Nissan has an automatic braking feature when reversing. It drives me nuts. I will be backing into a campsite or something, and the sensor will detect a blade of grass and suddenly apply the brakes. It is very obnoxious. Story 86. Not being able to use the global positioning system while the car is moving. All the time, my passenger tries to use it, but the system thinks the driver is getting distracted from the road. Story 87. Backup cameras, blind spot detection, crash avoidance. Anything that, in my opinion, makes you a worse driver. That said, I understand. The design of modern cars often reduces your outward visibility, which makes people reliant on these features. My bigger issue aside from making drivers complacent, is that technology can and will often fail. None of these assistive devices are a replacement for actually turning your head and looking before you back up or merge, and if your eyes, neck, or back are so impaired that you physically cannot do this, then maybe you should not be driving. I do not care how cool a car is or looks. If its design limits or removes my ability to drive it safely, then I am not buying it. Story 88. My car will not drive if the door is open. I cannot back it down the driveway without beeping like it is a long cross-country drive. Story 89. I learned to drive in icy winter conditions. I know how to brake, slide, and swerve on icy surfaces. These anti-lock brakes are making it more dangerous for me because I cannot feel and control the gliding. Those who have driven on ice know what I mean. Story 90. In my wife's car, it has the automatic cruise control. The sensor that detects cars in front applies the brakes abruptly on the Highlander, then takes a long time to return to speed. Also, the lane departure warning system is annoying. I am clipping the apex, not falling asleep or daydreaming. Story 91. Those always-on headlights. When I had a car with those, I always had to remember to turn my lights on properly. Thankfully, my current car does not have those, so I know my lights are on when I realize I cannot see. Story 92. Emergency lights. Whoever decided to make the emergency light the same as both of the turn signals made a mistake. Now, if you have an emergency, your turn signals are useless. If you cannot see both turn signals, you may think the driver is turning or changing lanes when they are not. When they do want to change lanes, they have no way to signal anyone. I cannot be the only one who is annoyed by this. Story 93. Smart cruise control. I can't stand it. I don't want to maintain a constant distance. I want to maintain a constant speed. Story 94. Back windows that do not roll down all the way. I want all the windows down completely, and when there is no one in the back seats, let me roll down my windows. Story 95. Automatic engine shut off when the vehicle is stopped. Literally the worst change to the automobile since the introduction of speed limits. Story 96. The maintenance or service light that comes on at intervals is a big yellow triangle with an exclamation point in the middle. It is alarming every time it comes on, and there is no simple button to turn it off. I have to get out my manual every time to follow the correct sequence to reset it. Story 97. Check your back seat with a small picture of a car seat. It took me a while to figure out that you could turn that off. Story 98. My Honda CR-V annoyingly beeps when I turn on the engine before securing the seatbelt. Even in park, I have to turn on the engine for the seat to auto-position itself. Then it displays a legal disclaimer on the screen for 10 seconds instead of Apple CarPlay Maps. Story 99. I drive a vehicle from 2002, and the traction control is genuinely unsafe, regardless of the road conditions. If I do not turn it off every time I drive, it stops me in the middle of the road when I try to pull out. I am sure it is much safer on newer vehicles, but I still do not fully trust it, especially if you cannot turn it off easily. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.